The Marine Toys for Tots foster care program is bringing hope to children who need it most. Every 2 minutes, a child enters foster care, often with only a small bag of belongings. More than 400,000 children face trauma and uncertainty, many before age 8. This May, during Foster Care Awareness Month, Toys for Tots is creating Room for Joy. In 2025, nearly 375,000 children received comfort through toys, books, and essentials, reminding them they are not alone. Donate now and change a child's life.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi!
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
All right. Shut that guy up. He comes on every week before we do, and starts yelling and instigating fighting between the hosts on the show. We don't need him to have a fight. We have fights all the time. And our co-host is none other than Jake Novak, and he is on a roll right now because more and more the issue of redistricting and how the district lines are drawn and what are the parameters whereby a district is acceptable and where it's not. So please let me introduce my co-host with his thoughts for the day, Jake Novak.
Well, my thought for the day has been my thought for the last 50 years, and that is no one listens to me. That's for sure, because as you know, Governor, last week on this program, I was excoriating my colleagues, not only in the journalism world, but in the political world, to embrace the Supreme Court decision, knocking down race as a possible criterion for districting, creating districts, because I really felt like these gerrymandered racial districts where 90% of the black people in this country live in were basically economic no-go zones. And I really still feel, the week hasn't changed my mind, I still feel that if these districts are properly redrawn, this will be the most economically liberating thing for black people in this country since the Emancipation Proclamation. That's how bad it's been for them in these districts where they have leaders who have literally no incentive to do right by them. And it shows. And all of a sudden, black people overnight could go from a forgotten part of the electorate, a taken for granted part of the electorate, to swing voters. And there's nothing better than being a swing voter. That's when you get the attention.
No, absolutely. That's absolutely right. So last week, I was really moved by what you said and have given it some thought. And as we look through this week, there was some redistricting in Virginia that got thrown out.
Yeah.
There was some redistricting in Tennessee that got thrown out. And then there was a situation a couple of days ago where in Alabama, they only had one majority-minority district, but they cut it in 4 pieces. And maybe that might be the area where the new economic development begins. Because they really sliced this district up. And if you thought that it was racially motivated, you could think that. But just in this period of time, I just think that it's been advantageous for particularly the Republicans to cut up as many districts as they can, because the future is not really clear how it's going to go. So I understand why they did it, but it was a little shocking.
Well, I mean, the biggest part of my frustration is that, look, I expect the Democrats to push back on this. I expected them to call it racist and evil. I think it's particularly wicked of them to do so because, again, this is really liberating people that they have kept in economic arrears for a long time. But the Republicans aren't doing much better, in my opinion. They're only talking about this in terms of how many new seats in the House they're going to get. And that's fine. That they can talk about in their private strategy session. My friend Scott
Jake,
Rasmussen.
Exactly, but publicly
they're talking about that, which they shouldn't. It makes you look
so politically naive, and it really ruins the whole sense of what our voting process is and why we vote.
Yeah, they should keep these numbers games to themselves. My friend Scott Rasmussen at Paterson Research, again, came out with yet another poll showing that the average voter just doesn't care about all of these numbers, doesn't care about the reapportionment part, but they will care if they are given the message that I'm again pounding on the table. This could be a real economic liberation for millions of Americans who have been kept out of the party for a long time. And have been told to accept a particular party's rule no matter what. And that includes, for example, in this Tennessee district, which just got erased, thankfully, a white guy was their representative. He was a Democrat, but he wasn't even. So this idea that, we're not going to get enough black people in the Congress if we get rid of these districts. And not only was a white guy representing them for many years, but he kept defeating a black woman Republican who kept running against him. I mean, the whole thing is nonsense.
How about that?
And I just think people need to understand that this is exciting. And the third group that I want to excoriate is my fellow news media professionals. Look, I don't care where you sit. I don't care if it's MS Now or Fox News. This is a huge story. We're in the business of getting people's attention. Some people call it sensationalism. There's nothing sensationalist about saying what I've said before. This could be a tremendously economic positive for so many people. And this should be, and if MSN now wants to debate that and push back and say some people like Jake Novak say, fine, but it's still getting the attention. Instead, they're not even covering this story really, other than, hey, look at these people yelling in the Tennessee State House, rent a rioters. Who cares? This is much bigger, and it's a good example of how this business, this news business, this media business, for all of its sins, I can't stand it when they don't take advantage of something that could get people excited. I'm in the business of exciting
people. You are really the only person I know who has brought this issue up. I've heard people bring it up because they heard you say it and then said it to me. So I just have to ask you, where did you come up with this idea? Because remember last week, I was all ready to debate you on it, but when you laid it out, I was like, for once I'm going to be an honest person and accept it, because it is a very interesting concept of how voting may change because of these new imposed rules by the Supreme Court.
Well, this idea comes from a lot of years and a lot of, I could say simply education, but also tradition. To really strip it down, I believe in natural law. I believe in the natural law of human rights and human dignity. And at the end of the day, nothing that I want to talk about politically or culturally matters unless it fits into that paradigm. And I'm not getting involved in anything that denigrates those things. So when I see that there's nothing particularly wrong with black people. So why are they continually the last rung on the ladder, or the lowest rung on the ladder economically? And it's because of these constructs, like these gerrymandered districts and their leaders who don't want to do right by them. And the overall Democrat Party in this case, and there was times when was other entities who were fine with trading off. The systematic racism against black people in this country exists on two fronts. On the education front, where the Democrat Party has decided that it's okay to allow millions of black children, generation after generation, to get subpar public education in favor of the teachers' unions' votes and money. And the same has been true. Now, a lot of people are aware of that one. They haven't been aware of the other one, which is similar. They are willing to let millions and millions of black people live in economic squalor in return for a guaranteed number of Democrat elected leaders from those congressional districts, and in some cases, state Senate districts or state representative districts, that kind of thing.
And it's probably, Jake, why not too many black people who lived in those areas, why it took so long to elect black Congress members, U.S. senators, and then inevitably the first black president of the United States. And part of it was that it was perceived that it was advantageous to live in those types of conditions when it actually was working counterintuitively to the way people would have wanted it to.
Yeah, they liked it that way. Remember, 15 years ago, Eric Holder said we need to have a conversation about race and racism in this country. And I was very eager to do so. I wish we had a conversation. Now, I think he really wanted to do a harangue, a soliloquy, and a monologue. I don't think he wanted to have a conversation. But that would have been my conversation. That would have been my contribution. Now, someone might say, like, well, you're not a black person, Jake, and it doesn't really matter what, you really shouldn't be participating in the conversation. But that's the whole point. If you want to talk about the way that we look at each other from racial lines or skin color lines, then you've got to hear both sides. And me as a non-black person, this is what I would say. This is the racism that I see in our country. I see the racism in this public education system, and I see the racism in these gerrymandered districts. And I think these two things are the biggest, massive problem. And, last week, you may have noticed, I very much refrain from, and I will continue to do so, refrain from using slave era terminology. I'm not going to say the word master or slave or plantation. And I said, not only because that's triggering rhetoric, but more importantly, because it's not really accurate to this situation with these districts. It's much more like feudalism. And feudalism, for those of you who didn't learn it in school, I urge you to read up on it. Here's the Cliff Notes version. Feudalism stinks, okay? It stinks. It's basically where you have a lord, not elected, who owned not only the land from an economic standpoint, but also had the political power. And it was like working at the company store. You work for the Lord, and he also owned the store. So you paid, it's like the old coal mining song by Tennessee Ernie Ford. The coal miners in this country in the late 19th and early 20th century worked for the coal mine. They lived in these coal towns. The shops were owned by the coal company, and they were constantly in debt.
I owe my soul to the company store.
That's right, because there was, and that's what feudalism is like. So we had the situation with this state senator in Virginia who had her offices raided by the FBI earlier, during the week. And we don't know all the charges yet, all the specifics yet, but they also raided the pot dispensary building, which is the biggest in her district and really the only one, which she also happens to own. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. She happens to be she's the most powerful person in the Virginia State Senate, which has been voting increasingly for legalizing pot and opening these dispensaries. And she just happens to be one of the owners. Wow, what a shocker. I wonder how many other new businesses have been opened in this district. Oh, and by the way, that's another thing, Governor. We can't get fracking. We can't get good manufacturing jobs. But gambling and free and legalized pot, the cynicism and the low esteem that our politicians have for the people who live in these districts, and in really a lot of other districts too, is off the charts. You don't need fracking. You don't need a manufacturer. We're going to keep the regulations high. Forget about building gas stoves. Oh, but you want to gamble? You want a little pot? Sure. This is really, that's viciously racist and cynical, and I'm sick of it.
Well, it is, it really is a kind of a breaking point for a lot of people these days, because we're really not addressing the issues that are the most important. And as you did point out, these kind of side distractions seem to get a lot of public attention. And where do we wind up? We wind up really not going anywhere. Do you think that this kind of rhetoric and back and forth and these differences of opinion and that kind of thing, are they going to have any impact on the midterm elections?
Well, it does seem like there are going to be a number of states that will maximize their Republican representation. It's not going to be, listen, some of these purple and blue states are going to drag their feet on following this Supreme Court decision. Remember, reminding me of Brown versus Board of Education, where there were a number of states that dragged their feet for many years on that decision, most notably Virginia, which just shut down all their public schools. I think there was one other state that did that too. They just shut them all down for a couple of years, which was, by the way, a huge shot in the arm to all the private schools in the state of Virginia.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Suddenly everyone had to go to private school. So they're going to drag their feet. But the red states, as we've already seen, have snapped into action. And it feels, again, that numbers game, I understand that it's important. I'm not saying that it's not important to talk about these numbers. I just think that if the Republicans understood messaging better and understood really a bigger picture, they would instead say what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks, which is it was a Republican president who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and it is a Republican president who is going to now implement the Supreme Court's righteous decision to break down these racially gerrymandered economic no-go zones that have left generations of black people in abject poverty. Now, that's the message they should be saying. But, again, as I've said to you, Governor, I have an alter ego, and my alter ego is Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant. And the reason why I'm unemployable is because I give good advice. To be a successful political consultant in this country, you need to give bad advice, divisive advice, harmful advice. And I'm unfortunately not skilled in those things.
Well, it's interesting because, whenever you hear the consultants and representatives of elected officials and others, it's almost as if they gain a certain type of reputation because one of their candidates surprised, the public and won, where they were thought to lose. Now, the consultant really gets more out of it than the candidate, because now the consultant can go around and sell that to other candidates about how they can make them win as well, and inevitably it catches up with them.
And have you noticed that some of the biggest, successful gurus, particularly of presidential campaigns, seem to only have one shot in their chamber? First it was James Carville. He never was a part of a successful presidential campaign after the '92 Clinton thing. Karl Rove with Bush, David Axelrod. It feels like these guys have one shot in their chamber because they catch a particular wave at a particular time, and I believe that they don't have that bigger picture vision. I've never heard a David Axelrod, James Carville, or Karl Rove speech where I really thought, wow, this guy has a great vision for the future of America. He's got a bigger picture ethic. He believes in the... No, it's all been we can get the state and that thing. And we, it's just small-minded people. And, there's never been a more powerful position politically in the history of the world than the presidency of the United States. And these small-minded guys are the ones who ferry these people into office.
Well, Jake, I'm impressed. You're an equal opportunity abuser.
Oh, yeah.
You got Karl Rove in there. Yeah. You got James Carville in there. And, David Axelrod. And that's inevitably what happens. Many of these consultants, they play the hot hand. Right. In other words, if people voted a certain way in Indiana a little differently than they should have, then we can say the same thing to people in Oklahoma. But it doesn't mean the same thing to them, which is why a lot of times that kind of advice or that kind of assistance fails.
Yeah. Carville was a hot hand. That's a great example. If you remember, Senator Hines from Pennsylvania had a plane crash and died. And they had a special senatorial election in Pennsylvania. And Carville was working with this guy, Harris Wofford, who won in the special election. And that was a wave that he was riding, and that's how he got in with the Clintons. And I happen to think that Bill Clinton was a fantastic campaigner. He had one Achilles heel going into 1992 is that he gave really, really long speeches. He only shortened his speeches slightly as president, but he did shorten them. But it was clear this was a guy who liked getting out there and glad-handing the people, being with the people. I don't think we've seen much like that since. I didn't buy it from Obama. I think President Trump likes speaking in front of large crowds and actually enjoys that. But I don't think anyone really enjoyed the actual face-to-face campaigning in my lifetime like Bill Clinton did. And so I don't know how much James Carville really played a role.
I heard Clinton speak at the 1988 Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, they had to shove him off.
They finally got him off around midway through 1999. And I remembered saying to the group I was with, you will never see that man again. He is an idiot. Boy, did I live to eat those words. And now I have to eat those words. But I actually told Hillary Clinton that I had said that once, and she got a real kick out of that. But that was, I think that that whole situation was the transformation of bringing ideas and bringing information to the public. That by 1992, I think every candidate that was running for president had a stopwatch because they knew they couldn't repeat the Clinton thing. Lived in infamy.
Yeah.
But do you think that that in this era there could be some kind of a breakthrough? I mean, I just get the impression that you hear about all these people who might be running for president, and you just wonder, are they going to just follow the old pattern? Or are they going to take advantage of what President Trump did, which is find something that people haven't done before and go out and do it? Now, before you get to answer that, we want to take a little time out and let our sponsors be heard, and then we'll come back here on The Left versus the Right. I'm David Paterson, and I'm here with Jake Novak, and we are just having a ball, and we hope you'll be here when we get back.
Roger Stone here. Every day you wait, your money loses value, but gold and silver don't follow those same rules. American Sovereign Bullion gives you access to a nationwide wholesaler network, helping you secure aggressive pricing on real physical metals. Call 844-272-2428 now to get your free gold and silver guide to learn how to protect your wealth with physical gold and silver, delivered right to your door or with a gold IRA. Visit asbgold.com. That's asbgold.com for your free gold and silver guide today.